Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie / 10K Rinks radio podcast mashup. I am Giles Farrell. Next to me on the couch is my usual cohort, Ben Remington.
Hello.
And then over on the far side of the sofa here in the Burnsville studios on this lovely afternoon, which we're spending indoors, we have Joe Booley and Tony Abbott from 10K Rinks podcast. Am I saying that right?
10K Rinks Radio. That's fine.
Sure.
It's close enough.
It's close. I'm in the ballpark. I do listen, I swear. I'm just bad at remembering things.
We just need you to download.
It just downloads to your phone and you just hit play. You don't even bother
yeah,
seeing
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it does.
That's what I recommend people do to our podcast, too.
Yeah. You know, I tried getting my fiance to do that. She still won't. She'll listen to her murder mystery podcast, but not my own.
I want to talk about speaking of your fiance and podcasts. I listened to the Nurses Week a few episodes ago.
I'm so sorry.
No, I love it. I love it.
I am so sorry.
I wanted to put together a meme, but every time I thought of it, I was at work and I couldn't put together a meme. So here's my Giles and the Goalies Nurses Week meme. Are you ready for it? All right, it's a picture of Allen Iverson.
Yes.
And it says, "We talking about prostates."
That's solid. That's pretty solid.
That's a good meme.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good one.
So put that together.
I wish either one of our significant others would get that joke, but they wouldn't. But that's okay.
No.
'Cause we get it, so that's pretty solid.
Yeah.
I still think
that's
it's
all that counts.
even out of context. I still think that would be pretty funny.
No, you got a good point there. Yeah, that's just anytime you bring up prostates, it's either shudder worthy or it's funny.
Get your checks
just
unless
shudder.
you're me.
I just shudder.
Yeah.
That's me. But hey, Minnesota Wild actually have actual real life news we can talk about on the special podcast this week, which is wonderful because we've been grasping at straws for the last few weeks for news.
Really have.
The biggest of which was Phil Kessel was in the news this week when it was reported by first, I believe it was The Athletic, had that the Wild and Penguins were in trade talks regarding Phil Kessel and Jason Zucker. Then there was Victor Rask and Jack Johnson somewhere in there too. And then Elliot Friedman later on further speculated that he was pretty certain that Phil Kessel went as far as to veto a trade to the Minnesota Wild. So in our roundtable discussion here, how does everyone feel about the proposed trade that seemingly is no more with the Wild and the Penguins?
So I think first of all, you know how like in a normal situation, I think you have like when a star player rejects a trade to your team,
Right.
the first game they come to their stadium, like they get the booze and stuff like that. I think if Zucker's still on this team, this will be the first time this happens, and like they get a standing ovation every time they touch the puck.
Yeah, I don't think, and from Kessel's standpoint, like you can't really blame him for not wanting to come to this train wreck. Like it's not even like he doesn't want to return home thing, even though he's from Wisconsin. I think it's just this situation is terrible, and why would you want to be a part of that? And you've got a GM that I don't want to rant too far into this, but like he's literally trading the guy he just signed to a contract extension and trading a guy he just traded for. Like he obviously has no plan. There's no plan there. Like he's just reshuffling deck chairs on the Titanic and without any kind of So I totally get Kessel vetoing that trade. Why would you want to be a part of that?
I guess I'm waiting for Sid Hartman's article to come out and say that Phil Kessel will never, ever get a job here in the city again. I'm serious. The whole, I think it was Josh Yeo in The Athletic kind of reported, he's got a connection to Suter. He's a Madison guy. Maybe he might. I'm like,
so what?
That's not when you're got a pretty good thing going. He scored, 82 points in 82 games last year.
Yeah.
He ain't going to come to the Minnesota Wild and put up 82 points.
No.
He phoned Suter, and Suter just said, don't come here.
Yeah.
Well,
He
and
used
you know
his
what?
phone a friend lifeline.
This is like the worst time of year to pull the he's buddies with this guy. Like they're both. If Phil Kessel wants to see Ryan Suter that bad, they could just go golfing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, the trade too, I don't know how you guys felt about it, but getting Kessel here obviously would be great. I mean, anytime you're getting top end talent like that, that's wonderful. But I don't know that he is such a significant upgrade over Zucker, especially when you factor in the contract and the no new move clause with Seattle coming and all that jazz. That it's a deal where it's just like you need to make this deal instantly. Like you're super excited about this deal as a Wild fan who knows kind of the ins and outs of that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm not really worried about Phil Kessel's potential impact on the expansion draft because I'm pretty sure like most of our tradable asset, like the guys you'd want to protect, like they might just protect like 3 skaters in the 2020 expansion draft, and it's just the no move guys.
Yeah.
No, but like I don't know. A few weeks ago, I thought that that something like a Zucker for Kessel would make sense. Just because like you are so left shot heavy, and Phil Kessel is a very talented right shot.
Sure.
And like he was a goal scorer coming out of college, and he was a goal scorer in his earlier days as a player, and now I think he's sort of settled into more of a distributor type role.
Sure.
And I think that would be like really great to put opposite like someone like Kevin Fiala, like where you have a guy who in Fiala who plays differently than a lot of the roster in terms of like carrying the puck in. Phil Kessel's very much the same way. I wouldn't be opposed to having Kessel on the team, but if you're doing that at the expense of Zucker, that is a downgrade, and that's sort of what changed my mind is looking at the advanced metrics and stuff like that, and seeing like Phil Kessel at this point of his career, at least at even strength, doesn't really impact offense like he used to.
Sure.
And he really is a drag on your defense.
Yeah.
And I knew the latter part. I didn't know the former part, and I thought like the Wild do have enough defense. Maybe you throw out Kessel, and then like you can like have like Marcus Foligno take the defensive minutes or whatever. But at this point, like I wouldn't be opposed to having Kessel on this team. I mean, obviously he is. But if you're doing it for Zucker, that makes no sense. And then the rest of the trade is pretty hot
gross.
garbage.
Yeah, it's pretty gross.
I think the Jack Johnson, Victor Rask thing, like, yeah, you get rid of Victor Rask, but, I mean, you're not getting much back from Jack Johnson.
No.
Not at all. And
Virtually nothing.
And, I mean, it's essentially trading a bio candidate for another bio candidate. And I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of that part, and I just don't – I don't know. I guess I think you're looking at it going like, yeah, Kessel probably saved the Wild's brass again because the proposed trades for Jason Zucker absolutely feels like absolute terrible asset management.
Yeah. Yeah.
And more to kind of Tony's point, he would talk about the advanced metrics. Like I was looking at this the other day, and Jason Zucker's been a pretty consistently good shooter at 5-on-5, and his average before this last year was kind of in the 11 range, kind of doing math in my head here. And then he was down below 7 this last year at 5-on-5, which I feel like is going to come back up a little bit next year, and you would like to have him on your team still. So giving him away for, as you said, like a below or a downgrade essentially is not preferred. And his shooting percentage would be through the roof if he was a wing on Pittsburgh, either next to Crosby or Malkin.
Right.
Well, how many chances this year did we count that ended up he ended up missing, shooting high, shooting wide? I mean, I remember that one. I can't remember the game exactly, but basically turned and fired, and it was a wide open net, and he shot it wide.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing with Zucker is I like a guy who's getting chances, and I got into an argument on Twitter with Tom Hoehn, and I generally like him okay on Twitter, but he's got his opinions, and I have different ones, and he's very true that the NHL is very results driven. Zucker isn't a guy that necessarily quote gets it done when it comes playoff time, but at the same time, Zucker is getting those chances, and he shoots a lot. So I'm going to take a guy that's going to get those chances, and you can't take the playoffs that are such an extremely small sample size, and with the Wild not getting deep really into them at all. how you can even come up with any sort of grandiose opinion that he can't get it done in the postseason. I think he was really good in was it the 2016 year, 2015 year against the Blues?
Yeah.
Well, that was the whole laugh at Ott thing, and you know, he ended up getting injured by blocking a shot with his hand, and so he couldn't really shoot the puck like he used to. I mean, weird circumstances happen.
Yeah.
It's tough to make some grand opinion that he can't get it done. And I would take a guy that actually is getting those chances to get it done and just, you know, live and die by his shooting percentage when it fluctuates in those situations.
Yeah, I think looking at playoff sample sizes to try to, you know, evaluate whether you should or shouldn't trade for a player is really ridiculous. Because you look at Jake Allen in 2016, you're thinking, oh my God, this is the best goalie in the history of the world.
Well, look at Charlie Coyle now.
Well, that's just it. Like, Charlie Coyle's had a great playoffs for Boston after being, you know, one of those quote-unquote no-shows for the Wild for how many seasons, and it's like, you can't base your entire evaluation of a player off of, you know, especially for the Wild's sake, they're playing 6 games every postseason. 6 games. It's nothing.
Against a goalie that magically eats Popeye's spinach and then puts up a 950.
Yeah, and same thing goes for Kessel and Zucker. Like, yeah, Kessel's had a great playoff run, no doubt about it. He's also had a couple of deep runs. I mean, he's won 2 cups with Pittsburgh now, and you know he had plenty of playoff experience before that. Whereas, as I said, Zucker has won 2 playoff series now in his career, and that's it. And so it's like he literally has, you know, if Kessel has more in 1 year of playoff series than Zucker had almost his entire time here. So it's like really hard to say that, oh, well, you got to trade for Kessel because he's such a playoff performer. Yeah, well, you don't know that Jason Zucker isn't because his team's never got any kind of semblance of a run whatsoever.
And, like, you know, Danny Heatley also had decent playoff runs.
Right,
and,
yeah.
and Thomas Vanek had decent playoff runs, too. And just like, oh, that's some of what's – there's a lot of what's frustrating with me with this trade.
Okay.
But that's one of them is just like the just never-ending cycle that's repeating, like, across regimes of just, like thinking that, like, oh, we need a goal scorer. Let's bring in an old goal scorer with no defensive value and see what he can do in his early 30s.
Right.
And, like, they were going to do it again.
Yeah. No, it's bewildering, but and also to the point of this season, yeah, being a player performer is nice. You got to make the playoffs first. And, you know, having a guy who's good through 82 games, good defensively, even generates offense, even if he's not shooting at a high percentage, you're going to take that for 82 games versus a guy who's, you know, a downgrade for those 82 games. Otherwise, you're not going to make the goddamn playoffs.
Bewildering. I like that. I like that as a slogan. Replace this is our ice with
Bewildering.
BeWILDered.
It is bewildering. That's the new slogan. It just doesn't nothing makes any sense. It's all bewildering.
Sorry to derail you there. So I don't even know where to go next with this. I think, you know what? Let's go back to bewildering and just like talk about how there's no plan.
Yeah.
There's absolutely like no plan, or at least no plan with like a clear direction other than like, let's make the playoffs, but just next year.
Let's get a bunch of former Preds.
Yeah, bring in all the former Preds. Anyone Paul Fenton has ever scouted before and was enamored with.
And I get that, you know, having looked at some guys, like having done a little bit of draft coverage, you kind of fall in love with some players.
Oh yeah.
And I have the same. I have a very intensely intense dynasty fantasy baseball team. You draft guys as, you know, 18-year-olds out of high school. You tend to fall in love with your own guys, and it's just kind of one of those traps. But it's one of those traps that, as a top flight, you're making 7 figures GM. One of those traps you can't fall into, and he very much seems to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So what is everyone's confidence level with the general manager right now? Because seemingly it was going to take an L on another Zucker trade after the Calgary one from February fell through. And
this is the third time.
Yeah.
This is the third time they almost traded Zucker.
Oh, yeah, I forget. He was almost sent to Arizona last year.
And you know what's ridiculous? I'm
And
just
they're
like,
still talking about it again.
I'm just wishing we could hop into a time machine and pull the trigger on that Nino and Zucker for this for the Max Domi.
Yeah.
Like that would have been such a better move than
Yeah,
what they
it
were
would
gonna
have.
do.
It absolutely would have.
Than anything that they've ever thought of since.
Well, what's this enamoration? Fenton seems to be enamored by Christian Dvorak.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't know.
What is so goddamn special about Christian Dvorak?
Nothing that I can tell. I mean, nothing more so than Zucker for sure. I don't get it.
He scored 50 goals in junior, but I'm pretty sure he was on a really loaded team.
So did Dmitry Sokolov. I mean,
Hey,
You know who
I'm
else
pretty
had a
enamored with
really
him.
loaded
Right.
team in juniors? Zach Phillips
yeah.
Oh, God.
of the St. John Sea Dogs. His line mate was Charlie Coyle.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Zach Phillips, R.I.P. You were a person.
You existed.
That caused physical pain, I think, to everybody in this room.
It hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Not good.
I think I just set a personal best for making a room uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's impressive too. That
Yeah,
was
that's a high bar to clear.
right.
But going back to your question about like confidence in Paul Fenton, like I'm really trying to like see the silver lining in it because like as somebody who is like this is it's time to move on from Fletcher, and I still think that it was. I think it was time.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I think it was time to move on from Fletcher and bring in a new voice. So I'm like, okay, like it's like it's been a slow build, right? To like that really crescendoed with the Nino Niederreiter trade, and like I would love nothing more than to stop dunking on this trade. I really would. I'd love to like forget it, but like it is emblematic of what's going on.
Yeah.
I think it's just almost throwing, like it's like flailing around while you're drowning, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not helping, and it's definitely making everything worse. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at until I can see Fenton sort of get his bearings and string together a couple of good moves. Like I don't know how you can be confident in him, and I'm someone who like really wants to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know Ben and I at the time, which was a year ago now, when Paul Fenton was hired, we were big believers in Paul Fenton and maybe pushing the right buttons, and here we are a year later, and we just seem to be dunking on him on a weekly basis.
Well, why wouldn't you be? Like, he came from a very successful
Yeah,
organization, learned from one of the better GMs.
Yeah. I think it was a good hire, and I think that you can't even fault Leopold for making that hire, because it's like, yeah, the guy's track record kind of spoke for itself, and he was a guy that a lot of people around the hockey world said that it was, he was due. He was due to get this big job finally. And so I still think it was a good hire. I don't think that, it's really tough to predict, like, oh, you don't know what you never know what the dynamic was inside a front office. So David Poyle, obviously very respected, made a lot of great moves. I talked about this when he was hired too. You don't know where Paul Fenton played into that role. Mm-hmm. Like, was Paul Fenton the guy saying, they're offering you what for Shea Weber? Yes, say yes immediately. You don't know if maybe he was a naysayer. You don't know. And so it's really impossible to project out that kind of stuff. Now, maybe it looks like maybe he was one of those crackpots that was telling David Poyle not to trade Shea Weber for PK Subban, or, to nix the Ryan Johansson for Seth Jones deal. Who knows? Mm-hmm. You have no idea. I mean, so it just hasn't quite worked out. We're only one season in, and I'm with you on wanting to give him a little bit of leeway, and you made the point several times this season. Sometimes there's a learning curve to being an NHL GM, and I absolutely believe that. I mean, it's a job that you can't possibly be prepared for. Anytime you get a big promotion like that, as good as you might be at your current job, you get a promotion to a whole new set of responsibilities, and you can't possibly be prepared for that. That's maybe part of the learning curve, and maybe this is what we've seen in year one.
So Paul Fenton was the one guy that made Ken Griffey Jr. not unanimous in the Hall of Fame.
That's very possible. Yeah, it's entirely possible.
I have articles written, and Tony has them too, where we basically applauded the move, or at at least try to shed some light. Like, yeah, this guy is the right guy for the job.
Sure.
And a year into it, we feel like we got to eat a ton of crow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one of those things where there hasn't been anything impressive really about any of the moves he made. Yeah, Donato I think feels like a solid move. I think Kevin Fiala can actually be a solid player, but
sure.
I think over the course of those moves, though, really what it comes down to is like he's so enamored by the wrong type of player, and you know you need to win these things. Like, I hear about the fifth round pick that wasn't conditional enough now that the Bruins are in the Stanley Cup final.
Mm-hmm.
That how do you not have that escalate as for each round that they go on?
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be better moves. I think Charlie Coyle. Weren't we talking last year? He was. Looked at maybe a trade chip for one of the guys from Montreal.
Mm.
How was that?
Galchenyuk?
Yeah, Galchenyuk. I think there was talk about that prior to the expansion draft trade freeze.
Sure.
I think there's a few other things that popped up where some of these players could really garnered a lot, and really he just kind of sold really low on them, and at the same time didn't get enough back for him for these guys that I think were among the Wild's bigger trade chips, and now you've got 2 chips left, and you really have to win those trades, and that puts so much more extra pressure on you as a GM.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh man, again, like I keep going back to just like the cycle of like what's old is new again, and what we saw with Fletcher, right? Big problem early on in his tenure, trying to win now while building assets for the future.
Yep.
Didn't work then. It's not working now. And then guys loyal to his guys, like we're seeing that now with Fenton, and we saw it with Fletcher. But I want to go back to another bigger reason why I don't really have that much confidence in Paul Fenton, and that is just because from all accounts, like Leopold's like we got to get back to the playoffs this year. We got to win. We got to win right away. We got to get these fans back, and whatever you can say about Paul Fenton's decision making so far, and it's not been good. When you have an organization, or when you have your owner coming down on you, taking this team that's clearly on the decline, that clearly should be trying to dump players for future assets, not older players that are going to be declining in production and are signed for 4 more years, not 25-year-old centers who are getting healthy scratched on a nightly basis. Like genuine assets, like accumulating picks, accumulating like young players like Fiala and Donato.
Yeah.
Like that's totally fine. But like, if you're not doing whatever you can to do that, and you're trying to make moves for the short term, I don't care how good you are at making trades, you're gonna make bad decisions with that kind of pressure.
Yeah, and I think it, with those trades, I think he actually did a decent job with the direction of those trades. Trading for Rask obviously was a disaster. Trading for Donato and Fiala, he's getting young NHL players. That's what you have to do if you want to, let's say, rebuild on the fly, and not be building for 5 years down the line when the core of this team is completely wiped out and there's nothing left anyway. So that's fine. That's all well and good, but it still just comes back to, I'm not particularly sure that he has a plan if he's looking to sign a guy like Jason Zucker to a 5-year contract, then try to deal him almost immediately as many times as possible, or trade for a guy like Victor Rask and then pretty much dump him off for a guy that is just a space filler and yet another buyout candidate like Jack Johnson that just reeks of not really having a long-term plan.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of getting the fans back, the other newsworthy item we had on the docket this week was that the Wild announced they had hired Mike Modano as a senior executive advisor.
Yeah.
Some kind of like
Convoluted
official
name.
sounding
Vice
thing.
president of business.
Yeah. Executive assistant to the general manager. It
Perfectly legitimate businessman,
Yeah.
Minnesota Wild.
it had been rumored for a while that this was something that was going to happen, and then they finally did that. And essentially, what I got out of this was he's here to like do like talk to corporate people, do like community outreach. Basically, what I get out of that is you hired avid golfer Mike Modano to do your corporate golf outing events. It's like, hey guys, if you can beat me, you don't have to give us more money. But he's so good, he's going to win and get them the corporate dollars. So that's what I get out of this.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong on that, and I think the whole Modano thing is very, very weird to me because like I didn't grow up a North Stars fan, so I didn't, I just missed kind of that 1991 heyday of the North Stars. I barely remember them leaving because of my age, but I don't understand the fascination with him, to be honest. Like, is he a Hall of Famer? Yes, absolutely. Was he drafted by the? I think so. Yeah,
He's a Hall of Famer. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And
well, I need to learn my history.
He's got the most points of any American-born player
Yeah.
in the league.
Oh.
yeah. He's that good.
Oh, it was Ronick that I'm thinking about. That's not a Hall of Famer.
No. He's legit.
Ronick, I even
HR.
would. I mean, he scored 500 goals.
No,
That's-
but I mean, he's not a Hall of Famer by virtue of not actually being in the Hall of Fame. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, Modano, I get, how good of a player he was. But this is a guy who was born in Michigan, a guy who played for the North Stars, I think, was it 4 seasons? 3 or 4 seasons?
Drafted 88.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I think it might have been 4 seasons.
yeah, so 4 seasons and then spent, another 10, 12 years in Dallas.
Right.
And so it's like, I'm sure if you ask him, off the record, he considers himself a Dallas star. Like, that's the bulk of
Probably.
his career. He won a Stanley Cup there. Why wouldn't he? I'm sure he feels very good about bringing hockey to a southern market and doing well with it and becoming a Hall of Famer at the same time. So, and not to say that the 4 years he spent here weren't a big part of his life. You can't spend 4 years anywhere without being a part of your life forever.
Right.
But this
he
isn't...
He married Joe Micheletti's daughter.
Oh, well, okay, then that's part of it too. But
Yeah.
Really hitting the one of us column.
right, but that's my point. Like, and I just think, like, of course, if he wants to be here, I don't know if the guy needs the money or what, but
No, he does not.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he does, but I just don't get it. It's like he's not Mr. North Star like people for some reason think he was. Like Neil Broughton should be that guy. You can even make a better argument for Dino Cicerelli, who's not even a local, but spent a long, more storied time with the North Stars. But I don't know. The constant hand job over Mike Modano, I don't understand it. I just don't. I don't understand it.
Well, and it's like we're going away from bringing in like all of these old Wild players to like senior positions, and now that we like saw like how well that worked, we're like, oh shoot,
Yeah.
what are we gonna do? Bring in the North Stars, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I can't wait to have actually, we might very soon, if Bruce Boudreau gets that consulting job, we'll have Fighting Saints alumni.
And then all you got to do to hit the trifecta is hire. Oh my God, I can't think of his name.
Minnesota
The-
Moose.
The coach of the Flyers, previously of the University of North Dakota.
Dave Haxtell?
Oh, heck
Yes,
so.
hire Dave Haxtell as an advisor, and then you have a Minnesota Moose representative.
That's good. That's good.
Nice.
Or like, like if we're thinking about ways to like just funnel these guys into hockey executive roles, I propose making the winner of Mr. Hockey from the high school league. Like 20 years later, you get 1 year reign as an executive.
We had Mr. Hockey at my school, Nate Day from North St. Paul in 2003. I'll can maybe Facebook him or something and see if he's interested in making a run at one of those jobs.
Might as well try.
Yeah.
I guess I don't hate the whole idea that Modano doesn't really have a ton of ties here. I mean, Steve Yzerman, he didn't really have like a big tie to Tampa Bay. Right?
Oh, sure. No, yeah.
I mean,
that's fair.
And he was successful down there. Now,
Yeah, that was a
obviously-
GM though. That wasn't
right.
as a
And
community relations.
There's
kind of
a
thing.
difference here too that Modano isn't in hockey management per se.
Yes.
So the whole basically you hired Modano. You're spending a shit ton of money for Modano to be your best marketer out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think Modano can be good a part of the organization, having an outside eye on it. But to be your corporate spokesperson, I guess, feels a little weird too.
All they got to do is put Modano out there in the North Stars uniform, and yeah, people will be forking over cash.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that guy could make
nostalgia is a powerful thing, and to some, mainly lots around these parts, it gets the old loins tingling.
Mm-hmm. It really does.
And for those kind of wondering why didn't he have any kind of position like this in Dallas, he apparently has this not great relationship with the Stars' new ownership. So it's kind of evolved as kind of a toxic relationship. So they don't get along. So Modano trying to get his start essentially in the business side of hockey, not coming with Dallas and Minnesota. And kind of to further the point on Steve Yzerman, I fully now expect Modano to burn us at some point to go back to Dallas.
Right, yeah. Now, so speaking of being burned by Modano in Dallas, wasn't there something right around the 99 Stanley Cup championship where Modano made a comment that said if we were in Minnesota, we wouldn't have won a cup? And
I'm sure he did.
I vaguely remember Minnesota hockey people being pissed off at Mike Modano for saying something like that.
I don't remember, but I believe it 100%.
Yeah,
I think, and
believe
I'd heard from an older friend of mine that when the team left town, he kind of roasted the fans a little bit because, and you know what, maybe rightfully so, because if you look at their attendance in the waning years of the North Stars, it wasn't very good. I mean, 1991, they were a pretty bad team. They went on a miracle run in the playoffs. But if you look at their attendance, they averaged 7,000 fans a night, and which is pretty horse shit.
Boom, roasted.
Yeah. So and I think when they left, they interviewed him about leaving. And he was just like, the fans didn't, kind of just called out the fans, like saying, "Hey, you didn't show up. Like, you sell at the barn every night, and we probably wouldn't have moved." And he was right, but it just makes for kind of a weird, one of those things where you're digging up tweets from 10 years ago, and instead it's an interview with him when he still has a mullet.
But corporate sponsors probably aren't into the whole digging up tweets from 10 years ago, and like we said, like that's right, at least for now, right? We don't know like what's going to happen in the future, and if this is if Mike Modano like has like even like vague plans or like vague ideas of what could happen in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't know any of that stuff, but like for now it's just like, okay, like y'all said, he's just golfing with people. It doesn't it doesn't really bother me. I'm not gonna have to golf with him.
Yeah.
Like they won't ask me.
You mean you won't get a chance to golf with them?
You know what? I sent back my RSVP as babies.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that I don't think that they intend on him having any kind of medal in the front office whatsoever. I don't think that wasn't a part of the deal, even though, I mean, if he is in on a meeting, whatever, but I don't think he's actually going to have any kind of formal responsibilities in any kind of player realm. So that's worth noting as well.
Yeah, Craig Leopold said that he, is available if Paul Fenn, needed him for whatever, but I don't think Paul Fenn's ever going to give him a ring. Also, I find it weird that Craig Leopold was out in front of the cameras for an interview like the same day for which he just hired an executive advisor. Usually you just get like a PR statement release, and I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird organization.
Agreed.
It just, you don't see that, and it just, why? It's just kind of, I think it more kind of drives the point of this is kind of like a, an SOS of please don't leave us, fans. Give us your money.
Yeah. No, I think it
I think he
does.
kind of sees the writing on the wall.
It does reek of that a little
We
bit.
will do anything to keep fans in the building except build for the future, except lower ticket prices.
Yeah. Except the things that actually matter to fans. We're going to give a whole bunch of window dressing around it, but that's about it.
Yeah. So that's kind of all I have for topics. What we were gonna do maybe a story to share.
Sure.
I kind of let you go on with that because that was more of your idea, and I kind of forgot.
Yeah, well, I
since my
figured,
memory's horrible.
we don't have a whole lot to talk about with the Minnesota Wild because, well, it's May and it's the Minnesota Wild.
We could talk Twins.
We could talk
Yeah, the
Twins.
Twins are world beaters.
Twins are great right now. That's always fun.
They
to talk
only
about.
hit one home run yesterday, and it wasn't until the 8th inning.
Is their hitting coach on the hot seat?
Joe Vavra's back.
Is there a Twitter account out there that says Fireball Deli or something already?
There probably
I mean,
is.
I'm
pretty sure within 1 month of Mike Yo being hired, it was already like a fire Yo.
Oh yeah.
Well, you know what? They were right.
Yeah. It's hard. Well, that's just it. And I was going to talk about that. Remind me of that with Fenton and about how positive we were when he was hired. Is that and this is kind of just something that irritates me across the entire realm of sports, and the Twins being a great example of it. People love to be negative, and it's great for them because in the end, you're always right.
Yep.
You're always right. Like 30 teams don't win the Stanley Cup every year now, and 29 baseball teams don't win the World Series. No, like the odds of you being right if you're negative are fucking astronomical. And so it's really, really easy, and I find that's really, really easy, and that's what irritates me about it is because it's really hard to be positive, right? Like it's really hard to get behind a Paul Fenton hiring and being like, yeah, he's going to do a great job. And then a year later, we're like, shit, I was wrong.
It's that joke about Mitch Hedberg, like, hey, Mitch, do you want this apple? No, eventually it will become a core.
Right. Like, it's just, it's so easy to be negative, and that's what irritates me about so much that in the realm of sports, and especially covering sports, that we see like all these radio hosts and God forbid columnist writers, that it's just like it's so easy to be negative. It's such a lazy way to go about covering sports that it really genuinely bothers me. We don't have to dive too much into that because I don't want people losing their jobs around here, but it's just one of those things that I thought of when we were talking about Fenton, and then it came back with the Twins too, because people are finding ways to be negative about the Twins right now, and it's just like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, just enjoy the goddamn ride.
Yeah, we don't want to turn off the blogger, podcaster money faucet.
Me and Joe did, and we were barely scraping to get by. Let me tell you, Joe and I hung it up this year, and it's gonna be a whole lot of weenie water soup around this household. And
if we do a draft party,
Ghetto
it's
spaghetti.
also gonna.
You know what that is, right? Ramen noodles and
oh,
ketchup.
yeah. Yeah.
If we do a draft party, it's also gonna be a benefit concert for Ben and Joe.
You gotta raise some funds for retired bloggers.
Ben's gonna have to do a Patreon for his baby's well-being.
Yeah, pretty
For
much.
just
yeah.
$1 a month, you can help an ex-blogger in need.
In the
Exactly. Just showing me with runny poop on my hands, changing a diaper all sullen and sad because I don't write about hockey anymore.
You've gone from affording the finest jerseys for your son. You now have to go, down the rack to the bear head of the Boston Bruins jersey from the 90s.
You're gonna have to pick up
The
the worst
Goldman's
jerseys for your
Fishermen.
kids,
Yeah.
like the Atlanta Thrashers and
I have
the
that.
Mooterus.
I have that.
I know.
No, but yeah, to your point, I'll have to start shopping for hockey jerseys at Target or something.
The Avalanche Reebok Edge jersey.
Oh, gross.
Your $1 a month Patreon donation goes to buying one of those for Baby Rem. So yeah, hockey stories. Since before we, unless we want to get Roz down here and talk about Baby Rem for a while more.
Or more prostate exams.
Yeah, but
Live on the air.
you got any more Lamaze class stories you want to share? No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
I don't want to relive that. No.
But no, we figured to go around the room and maybe share a hockey story, and I kind of let you kind of divulge what you more had in mind for that.
Sure. Well, I just kind of we in sports podcasts we kind of cover the team, right? Like we don't tell stories about things like you typically hear on some of the interview type podcasts, like Mark Maron or something along those lines where
Who are you guys?
yeah, he gets stories out of people and it's always good. So I was wondering if we had in this room we probably have some decent stories out. Just a quick one off the top of my head to get us started. I played hockey in the lovely State Fair Coliseum, and
treasured barn of mine.
Treasured hockey barn, and my friend. So we're just dumb teenagers and screwing around with stuff. And my friend Tommy sets off the fire extinguisher in the showers, not really fully understanding that there was a fan also in the showers that would drag all of that chemical into the locker room. So he blasts it once, which was plenty enough, trust me. And it literally this giant floor fan just disperses fire extinguisher chemicals throughout the entire locker room of the State Fair. And yeah, I don't know that we weren't part of shutting that arena down for hockey, but it very well could have been something to do with it, because that was just one of the many instances where it's just the locker room shenanigans were just kind of off the charts as a kid playing hockey, and that was one of the better ones. That was pretty stupid.
How did you avoid the cattle and horse shit?
I don't know. It was weird. I'm trying to remember back because I only played there once or twice. I think they had rubber tracks that went because locker rooms were like detached across the concourse from the rink. Basically, so they literally had to lay down like rubber mats all the way across to the ice surface.
Every locker room had rubber mats going to the ramp up to the ice.
Yeah, whereas other arenas, like literally the entire area was rubber matted, so you never had to worry about where you're walking. But at the State Fair, obviously they had to like create like this weird little path that you'd have to like tightrope walk almost all the way across to the ice surface. That was that was an interesting place to play hockey for sure. I've played at some weird places, but the State Fair Coliseum was really kind of surreal almost playing there.
Oh man, okay. So I didn't play hockey in any sort of organizational level. I vaguely remember like one time as a kid, like maybe being like 7 or 8, and like being on rollerblades with like a neighbor, like skating on like, I don't know, just like
asphalt.
Not asphalt. It was concrete. It was in the middle of like a bunch of military housing, so like there was like a center court or whatever, and I can remember vaguely skating on rollerblades and clotheslining myself with an actual clothesline and falling down. And that was my hockey career until like, I don't know, 3 years ago.
I can understand what took you so long. I've never heard of somebody actually clotheslining themselves on a clothesline before. That's pretty good though.
That's a good one. So I grew up in Shakopee, and one of the upperclassmen who worked at the arena always kind of opened it up after, the arena would shut down at like 9 o'clock or whatever.
Right.
So we'd go in and skate basically till whenever, 2 in the morning, shooting pucks, whatever. And then after he went to the Marine Corps, it kind of died down. And then my friends and I, my one friend, after his grandma died, he got goalie pads, and he wanted to be a goalie. And he's not.
First mistake.
Yeah, well, he wasn't good.
Sure, of course.
So I was talking shit one time, like everything that's low, you shoot low on him because he didn't know how to butterfly.
Sure.
Was a goal.
Right.
And he got pissed off one time. He hated it that I was talking shit about his play. And this is during the baseball season, so I was playing, and it was like, yeah, you know what? I don't really have like insurance right now, so I'm not gonna really. I don't really want to go play. But he's like, what? You want to talk crap and then you're not going to show up and play? So I was like, all right, I'll come out and play. And I don't know what it was, but it was like everybody like either knew that was going on, or like I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Scored like 4 goals and like 5 assists on them against them. It was just ridiculous.
So I want to, before I share, I want to point out that while you guys were sharing your stories here, I looked up at the TV, and NHL Network just had a camera panned on analyst and former Wild legend Mike Rupp eating a sandwich. So
okay,
you guys were missing riveting television here as they do Stanley Cup Final Media Day.
Mike Rupp, like I'll never get over the fact that he has a hat trick in a Stanley Cup Game 7.
Wow,
I know, isn't that mind blowing?
Yeah, I forgot all about that.
You did. Isn't that with the Devils?
Yeah, that was with the Devils.
Oh, yeah. I think that was the Devils' Mighty Ducks.
Yeah. Wow.
that can go.
The John Sebastian
Down
Jaguar playoff.
So
Boo. Big goalie pads. And
back to the Coliseum, because that's a place near and dear to my heart, because I spent so much time there when I was in my youth, like my high school years essentially. My uncle worked there, and he did the clock for all the hockey games they had, so I got to sit there in the penalty box and open the doors and brush up with the likes of, I think, like Nick Bukestad strolled into the penalty box once, so that's a cool thing to have. But yes, I miss the Coliseum, and I've never seen a Section 4 final ever since the Coliseum was shut down. But
How tall was Nick Bukestad back then?
he was tall. He was an imposing figure in high school.
He was not all. Was he all 6'6" then?
Yeah, it was like
Probably.
it was like 6'4", 6'5". Yeah, it was. There was not a lot of, height he's added on since then. But yeah, that's scary when he comes into the penalty box, not happy that he had to take 2 minutes into the penalty box. But yeah, and so I think I've shared this. I don't know if I've shared this before. Essentially, my start with this sport is kind of like Tony. I never actually got to play hockey competitively at any level, and my grandfather was a youth hockey coach when his kids were playing, and he always made sure his team, any players needed a ride, he'd make sure they get there in his back of his van with his painter's benches that he'd have not legally set up in the back.
This is sounding ominous.
Yeah.
Right.
So no, I learned the game from him because my grandparents took care of me a lot when I was a kid, and my treasured memories would be watching the ESPN or the NHL on ESPN in the 90s, watching
yeah, there you go.
Red Wings and Blues when that rivalry was ramped up, or Red Wings Avalanche.
Yeah, it was a
so
good
this
one.
is a lot of
Yankees, Red Sox.
Yeah,
Pretty much was, yeah, at that time.
sadly, no Mighty Ducks, as I was never allowed to stay up late when they got the
Yeah.
the nationally televised games. But that's essentially how I got started in this, and so
Man, when you said ESPN NHL, what was NHL on Ice? What was it? Or what do they call it?
NHL
National
Tonight.
Hockey Night.
Tonight, yeah, it was NHL Tonight. Was
I can still I don't remember the name, but I can still hear the theme in my head
Yeah,
like
oh, yeah.
20 years later.
Yeah.
Iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of my origin a little bit too. I actually didn't start playing hockey organized until later. I mean, 5th grade, which is crazy late for
Pretty
Minnesota, obviously. But yeah, I watched the Mighty Ducks movies as a kid, moving around the country a little bit, and then when I moved back up here, I lived with my grandma for a short time, and she had cable. And so I watched hockey every night. Like the 1996 playoffs, I had watched almost every game, it felt like, and I was really super in tune with that. And then the following year, my mom moved back up here, and they hand out things at school, which I guess I don't even remember was a thing, but they would hand out flyers at school for, hey, the City League is opening up hockey for the season, and that's when I started. And it was all based on watching NHL on ESPN and also the Mighty Ducks movies, which got me into watching the NHL on ESPN. But that was my origin story, which was a little bit unorthodox, especially for this area. But you guys were on the same thing, watching a lot growing up, or?
I definitely watched a lot growing up, but I'm about the same age as you. I vaguely remember the North Stars being in town,
Right,
but
barely.
none of the actual not the 91 playoffs. Don't know anything. I used to have a poster of Mike Modano in my room, but that was about it. I didn't really know.
Yeah,
It's got some good value now.
Yeah.
Hang on to that.
Yeah. Have him sign it at one of his golf outings.
Also, a sidebar into Mike Modano. I didn't add this earlier when we were talking about him, but if you Google Mike Modano on the right-hand side, it kind of gives his, basically the Wikipedia snippet of who he was, and then it gives kind of his height, weight, birth, spouse, whatever. Then below it lists movies, The Mighty Ducks.
Yeah. Yeah.
That 1 minute cameo
Yeah.
Yeah. With
That's all it
Basil
takes.
McRae.
Yeah. That's all
where
it takes.
he said, "I thought you were a farmer."
Yeah.
That's it.
You know what? Better than Kazam.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He didn't have a cameo in The Master of Disguise by Dana Carvey.
Oh, who did have a cameo in The Master of Disguise?
Jesse Ventura had a cameo in The Master of
Oh,
Disguise. That was a
damn.
big deal because he left. You know, he went on. It was like some secretive thing, like he was going somewhere during his governorship.
You guys probably don't know this because y'all don't run around in weird Twitter circles like I do. But did you know that the turtle club scene in The Master of Disguise was filmed on the morning of 9/11?
Oh God!
Wow.
They filmed that scene on the morning of 9/11, and they just basically had a moment of silence, and then went on to film the most iconic scene of this stupid movie.
What the?
God.
Oh wow.
Oh man.
They didn't take the day off on
Nope.
that. Apparently.
Wow.
They finished the turtle club scene.
Wow, that is
That's strange.
It's real
really,
weird.
Really weird. That makes me kind of want to watch that movie and to
Right.
go up a little bit.
So back to my so I cut my teeth watching Gopher hockey.
Sure.
You know, it was every Friday, Saturday night. If I wasn't doing something or whatever, my dad and I would watch it. It was 97 Pride on Ice.
Yeah.
It was what got me.
Yeah.
You know, I loved Steve DeBus, even though I don't think he was that great of a
He
goalie.
wasn't. I know exactly. I watched those games too.
know?
I remember being like,
I know.
"Yeah, he's not that good." But,
Mike Crawley was my absolute favorite.
Yeah.
I wanted to wear number 22 because he was just so good.
Yeah.
Something about ripping a slap shot from the blue line that just finds its way through everybody and wrinkles the twine was awesome. But that team was what hooked me.
Yeah.
Knowing that they were all, kind of from the neighborhoods around the metro and Minnesota.
Well, the Woog Wall was up at that point. So,
Right, yeah. This is right after the high school tournament with Dave Spihar. So I mean,
Yeah.
it was kind of all of this.
Yeah,
this-
he was on those teams.
This
too.
was like the development of my hockey knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And then it transferred over. So once the Wild were announced, then it was like, yeah, I'm hooked already. And
Yeah.
even though I think the name is weird.
That's a good story I do have is I remember vividly because they announced the name and team at the arena that I played a lot at, Aldrich Arena, right?
Okay.
Literally blocks from my mom's house, literally blocks. And
Which is
so,
where the Section 4 final now is that replaced the Coliseum.
Yep.
I'm not bitter about it.
But yeah, I remember we had hockey practice that night, and so all of us and it was 98 or so I was 12. So we're all sitting around, and this whole announcement thing had happened during our practice, and so we're all getting undressed, taking our equipment off and stuff, and somebody comes in. I forgot who it was. I don't know if it was another kid that wasn't at practice or somebody's dad or something or someone. They're like, yeah, they announced the name. It's the Wild, and the whole room just goes, ugh. And and their colors are green and red. And we're like, ugh. Just a whole room of 12-year-olds being like, what? Why? Why did they do that? It's a very vivid memory to me. I think we were at Polar Arena in North St. Paul when
That's funny.
Or it was one of those crappy county arenas in the area that were just like, they did what? And the colors, what? Oh, why did they do that?
Yeah.
It feels like they and granted, I was part of the final vote too, so I had gotten the flyer to vote for the name and the final 6 names, and none of them were all particularly.
What
that
did you
great.
vote for?
I don't even remember. I honestly don't. I got the flyer because I entered a name, and this is another great Minnesota sports memory where they had a thing at the state fair saying, name the Wild, or name the hockey team. No, it was in the Wild, obviously. And for some reason, I'm 12, so I don't know any better, and I'm like, hey, you know what's a really cool name? The Tornadoes. I'm going to put down the Minnesota Tornadoes. So I go to the little form, fill it out, Minnesota Tornadoes, put in my address. Every other name on the sign-up sheet was the Minnesota Tax. And I remember even being 12 years old, be like, man, people are really pissed about taxes around here. It seems like people are really upset about this, and I don't know why.
Actually,
And so
the taxes would be such a great heel name for a mascot.
it would be like IRS from the early 90s WWE, where it's just this shithead tax attorney, yelling at people to pay their taxes. That would be a great.
Instead of a T-shirt gun, there's a huge vacuum cleaner. They drop money from the Raptors, and it
Sucks up all the money from the people.
So you guys have all been recently married or you're going to get married soon.
Mm-hmm.
My first date with my wife was we were 19 years old. I was still playing hockey with my buddies at the community center because that's all I never played organized hockey, so we always just played, after hour type shit. And I had this plan that with her, we're gonna go on a date, we're gonna have dinner, and then I was thinking like bowling afterwards because I didn't want to go to a movie and not like talk with her. I wanted to interact.
I've never understood the movie First Date. I've never understood that.
So.
I don't know, guys. I would really want to see Detective Pikachu if I was single.
So she wasn't really feeling the bowling thing, so we just kind of drove around a little bit, and I didn't really know what to do.
Okay.
'Cause I'm not old enough to just go to a bar,
Right, yeah.
So all of a sudden my buddy calls me up and he goes, "We're playing tonight. You want to skate?" I look over at her. "Mind if I go play hockey? You want to come with?" She goes, "Sure." She sat on the bench, and I played goalie that night too, by the way.
Ooh.
And she put on my hoodie because she was freezing her ass off on the bench.
Right.
But she stuck through it, and we got married. So
wow, that's
yeah, that was my first date with her. Is I went and played hockey, and she sat there and froze her ass off and watched me, not really even knowing what hockey was at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was that was date number one. I felt bad, so I owed it to her. So then we did go to a movie after that. But
What was the movie?
Oh God, I'm probably gonna get.
What would this have been?
I'm probably gonna get killed for not remembering what movie it is.
13 or 14 years ago. That puts us back at like 2005, 2006.
Yeah, 2006 ish.
2005.
Was it?
Batman Begins.
That would have been even better if that was actually it, but no, it wasn't.
Was it Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift? Because I remember going going to that with a girl around that time. Didn't go as well as yours.
I actually think it was more like some crappy rom-com or whatever.
Oh, yeah. That'll happen.
Like Matthew McConaughey in it or something.
Of course. He's in everything.
You did owe her.
Yeah, that's true.
Did
yeah,
owe her,
you did owe her, yeah.
All right. What do you want me to go with the first? Are we gonna keep that rolling with the first date stuff? Because
if you want to,
we don't have to. So I guess if we're doing these stories, met my wife in college. My wife. Very nice. But at the end of the story, we all have to laugh. High five. So I met my wife in college in our freshman year at UWS during orientation weekend. So we ended up going to the same, like, the theater department put on this like improv thing, like just like as an icebreaker thing. Mm-hmm. So we ended up walking along the same route to this like crappy improv thing where like 4 people showed up. So they had us, they had my wife and I do a scene together. And the scenario that they set up was first date. So that's the first time I met my wife.
That's pretty solid, actually.
Like people immediately, like fate immediately funneled us into a first date thing. And I'm really bad at improv.
Okay.
At least like in a situation where like, you know, people are watching and like I have to like think and stuff. So it went awful. It was a bad scene. Like they like mercy ruled the scene.
Took out the shepherd's hook.
Yeah.
And it took me that was September. We were officially dating by the end of October, so it took me 2 months to recover from that one.
That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, I don't have a great first. We met at a coffee shop, talked for a long time. That kind of nothing really. Didn't have any hockey games involved, anything like that.
Do we need to call her down here and give her account for it because you're selling it short?
Yeah, no. Well, actually,
please don't. That means we definitely
will not shy away from.
No, I think our second date there was a wild game, and I tried my best to stay off the Twitters that night. I very much tried to behave because I was already writing a Wild Extra at that point, and tried very hard. And it was also the day after Election Day in 2016.
Oh, Lord.
So it was kind of a awkward day in general for a lot of people, obviously. And yeah, there was a Wild game, and I was kind of like, yeah, so I write about the Wild, and I'm on Twitter a lot, and I'm going to try not to do that tonight. But it's tough.
Did you make it through the game without being on Twitter?
I think I tweeted a handful of things, but I
Okay.
wasn't. We were out at a bar. We were actually at funny enough, we were at Poor Richard's in Bloomington because it was right by her apartment, where the ill-fated this podcast was conceived at Poor Richard's, and we had our Wild Extra launch party there, and it was kind of two of the three times I've been at Poor Richard's were the Wild Extra launch party and
The
my
Nate
second
Wells
date with my
meltdown.
wife. Yeah. Yeah, we blamed Nate Wells because the Wild blew a 5-goal lead that night to the Rangers. So.
Oh, it was that night.
Yeah,
huh?
it was that night. Yeah,
Oh,
it was
man.
not a good omen for Wild Extra.
And then Nate can't win because he
might
left the
imagine.
state and the Wild missed the playoffs.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So on my first date, this is funny. We were actually, Jamie and I were actually talking about this a couple weeks ago. So I didn't do a movie. I didn't do any hockey skating or playing. That was the Saturday of the roster freeze for the expansion draft. So
I thought you were going to say it was on 9/11. You just kept going.
So most of the morning and afternoon, I was, kind of essentially just buried into my computer,
Right.
looking for news or whatnot of what could happen, because there was a lot of talk that the Wild were going to be active in trades before that, which never
There's a lot of
happened.
talk for a lot of seasons.
Well,
like
and
that,
then they
yeah.
did, and careful what you wish
Yeah,
for.
that's exactly it.
So then it finally came time for me to, get ready and go on this date. And so I did, and so we were out at dinner. And first of all, I'm very awkward to begin with, so I wasn't saying much until a couple of my old fashions had been drained.
Sure.
But she told me later, she's like, "Yep, I just remember thinking, God, you were on your phone a lot," because I kept kind of checking for news at certain points to see if there was anything relevant that I needed to keep up, because I also had the podcast the next day.
Yeah.
And so then kind of as the old fashions, kicked in, I kind of finally gave it up. But I just remember thinking, man, she stuck around after she thought, boy, he's on his phone a lot. Checking this Twitter thing out. But yeah, and then I did reference that on the podcast the next day, which we went back and listened to, where I kind of covertly dropped it in there. I said, yeah, I was off the grid for a while, so I didn't know what was going on, but nothing happened.
You
so
didn't
I
hear the
miss
wonderful
anything.
news that the Wild decided to protect Jonas Brodin
Yeah,
instead of Matt Dumba, and
yeah. So that
Good
was
times, good times.
that was my first date experience, and she's still here. She's still learning the hockey thing. She was overjoyed when the Wild season came to a gracious end.
Yeah.
As was
this
I.
last April.
I think we all kind of were, yeah, for that
We all
matter.
kind of limped to the finish.
Yeah, I think one of my prouder moments of this hockey season was that we went to the final home game for the Wild, and
Sorry.
yeah,
Oh.
right. And so we go there, and we got really good tickets. We were in the Schreier luxury suite, of course, and we're there. And I don't talk a whole lot about hockey and my particular issues with the Wild with Roz a whole lot. And about 5 minutes into the game, she just lights up Alex Stalock about why he can't stay in his net and why he's always constantly trying his damnedest to play the puck, even when it's inappropriate. And I felt such great vindication at that time. Just like
I always liked
yes,
that, Roz.
yes, this is great. Like this is this is why we're married.
I'm at a loss for words. That rules.
So, as a hockey blogger, then when you were like, I'm really into hockey, and oh, that's cute, and then they kind of are brought along for the ride when it comes to watching every night, covering the games, all that kind of stuff. What was that like for you guys? Because I'll tell you what, it was always for me, I'm just glad that you're home, you're not up at the bar all the time and whatever. It keeps you honest. I'm like, okay, great. But then it was always you got another game tonight.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, and I'm covering it. That's
Go out
what I
play
got to
again
do.
tonight. Again.
Yeah. That honestly, I mean, with Roz, her frustrations were never with me writing or podcasting. Even it can be inconvenient at times because I got to get stuff done or whatever. But it's just the amount of games that you watch. Just the fact that you try because you're covering the team, and it's not like baseball where you can definitely miss a day. And it's not like football where there's one day a week. with hockey, and I'm assuming with basketball, it's just like you kind of have to make an effort to watch as many games as you possibly can.
It's a grind.
Yeah, and so it becomes where you're watching, upwards of 70 games a year, easily, games where you really can't get out of, and so that's really what it was, and that's, really what the main issue was with Roz, is just we spent a lot of time watching Wild games, and me watching, and it doesn't help either that me watching Wild games consists of sitting on Twitter and bullshitting with you guys, and bullshitting with other fans, and just kind of learning things throughout the game, because that's part of the experience too, I feel like. And so not only are we watching the hockey game, but I'm not talking to her the entire hockey game, basically.
But talking to everybody else
yeah,
but her.
I'm tweeting about it, and I'm watching the game too, but you're on Twitter, and you're not necessarily eyes glued to the screen 100% of the time, which was hard for her to understand too. It's like, I'm listening. I know it's Tony LaPanta and it's not great, but I'm listening to the game and I'm watching it, obviously most of the time, just not 100% of the time. And so that was really kind of the sticking point, I think, was just the amount of games that you have to watch to write about the team.
You're randomly laughing at something on Twitter and not
exactly.
Basically, she's like, what? And I'm like, oh, you should have saw this
you
thing
wouldn't
on Twitter.
get it. Like, it's an inside joke. Those are the worst.
I think Alicia's just in quiet acceptance of the hell that she signed herself up for.
Sure.
Because you guys are talking about we're watching these games. We're always randomly laughing on Twitter. That must be annoying. And I'm like, oh my god, that probably is annoying.
I think it might have been different for you two, I think, as you were with your gals before you started writing. Is that accurate?
That's true, yeah.
So I think that helps a lot, where me and Giles, our poor significant others, were just kind of, is just kind of thrown into the game a little bit. So, yeah.
All right. I think unless anyone has anything else pressing they want to share, we can probably call it a show there. We've hit our hour mark, as Commander Tom prefers, and so we can probably wrap it up.
He's
there.
a Commander Tom, not Major Tom.
No, he hasn't been promoted yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably is like Admiral Tom at this point. Let's be honest. So Tony and Joe, where can people find you on Twitter, as we've so discussed, and your podcast?
Well, you can find our podcast, first of all. Let's do a plug for that. 10K Rinks Radio. We are, I guess we consider ourselves sister podcasts in the same way that the Minnesota, Annapolis, and the St. Paul consider themselves sister cities.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Love it. That was perfect. Flawless. Great technique. So yeah, if you guys want a little bit more wild content every week, subscribe to 10K Rinks Radio. If you want more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at OhiTony.
And then I'm on 10K Rinks Radio as well. Subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. That's always great too. But you can also find me on Twitter at JoeBoo15. And I don't write anywhere anymore.
Yeah.
I'm officially retired, and not actually calling it a retirement. I am no longer writing for that site.
Sure.
He's a free agent.
Yeah.
Is he a Jaromir Jagr free agent?
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
I reserved that right too when I said that I'm not going to write anymore. I was like, it's not necessarily the end for me. And I reserve my right to be very Brett Favre about this.
Oh, yeah.
And just make a complete scene about if I'm going to come back or not.
We got Jaromir Jagr and Teemu Solani here.
Yeah, pretty much.
The day I said farewell was that brutal final game of the season against the Stars.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't at all, it doesn't bother me that I'm stepping away right now. This is horseshit.
Well, but come September, I think it's entirely possible. It's maybe I want to write something about this.
I still get the
knows?
mock draft emails for the SBNHL. And it's I know who the Wild picked in this one. I'm like, I don't know if I would have gone that way. We've already kind of are waiting on a Russian.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah.
So if you're like Brett Favre in retirement, does that mean somebody's got to send a jet to Burnsville to retrieve you?
Yeah, somebody's got to spend a small puddle jumper to land in our cul-de-sac and pick me up.
A Cessna.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, small Cessna.
You can find Ben on Twitter at Ben Remington. And follow him there for his thoughts now, as he's
No longer writing.
quote unquote retired.
Yes.
And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Giles Farrell, and then our podcast, lovely Twitter account at GATG Wild Podcast, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, blah, blah, blah. That's where you can listen to this. Otherwise, Fine Production, as one of our fine iTunes reviewers called us. And yeah, you can also find me writing at zonecoverage.com/wild, where I am slowly but surely doing player reviews from this past season, and I had to pour one out for our pal Matt Dumba when I went through his this last week. So
Still heartbreaking.
It's crushing. So you can go ahead and be crushed while reading that. I appreciate it. So yeah, thanks to Tony and Joe for jumping on with us this week, and Ben and I will be back again next week.
Sure.